This video is a quick review Canon 70 to 300mm f4 to 5.6 LIS USM Canon EF lens. This is a baller lens. This is a must-have lens in anybody's kit who is even thinking about doing things like events or weddings or even travel. The reach that you get, the stability that you have, and the image quality that you get is probably, in my opinion, second to none, especially for the value of how much this lens costs. Whether it's to buy or even rent, we're going to go over that here. Most likely going to cost you less than 700 or somewhere around 700, but you probably get used for under 500. So that's one of the cool things. Next, this thing is a full frame lens. It's designed for full frame coverage. Now, the perk is that if you want reach, then if you have a full frame camera, there's going to be a crop mode in here. And then that crop mode will allow you to get a 1.6x closer. So at about 300, you get 450. However, I would not recommend this lens on a crop sensor, except that you are in a well-lit area, outdoors, adventuring. But if you're going to be indoors, it is best suited on a full frame camera because of the ability to on a larger sensor, you get greater light sensitivity and ISO sensitivity and less noise when compared to putting this thing on a crop sensor. And you'll also notice less noise on this lens when you go into crop mode in comparison to a crop sensor at the same focal length. And I think honestly that one of the best cameras to use this lens on is the R6 Mark II. So one of the perks of the EF mount, this mount will allow you to adapt this lens. Canon, could be Panasonic, could be Sony. And so that's definitely one of the major perks of having an EF mount cameras. And this is why I also advocate getting EF mount cameras and not native mirrorless, unless you're looking for the specific benefits and features that come from mirrorless cameras and you're solely invested in that ecosystem. So for example, you're invested in the Sony E-mount, then obviously you want to get E-mount lenses. However, if you are not vested in any system, right? Like myself, I have Sony cameras for work stuff. I have Canon cameras for my personal stuff. And then for like podcasting, like video podcasting stuff, I have Panasonic cameras that set up in a little garage studio. And so I need lenses that I can use between all three different systems. And therefore having an EF mount or even vintage glass works out really, really well. EF mount glass all day, every day. Now, when it comes to autofocus, generally speaking, the autofocus noise on this is not bad. You hear that? So it's relatively silent, but it is still audible. So if you mount a shotgun mic, for example, directly on top of this, you will get some clickety-clack of the autofocus there. But then again, you're not going to be doing one of these things, right? For getting scratch audio, I think it's totally appropriate. This lens is surprisingly small. So these right here are two 80 to 200mm zoom lenses that I use for seminar production, things like that, especially when I'm in a large space. Canon 8200L, Tokina 8200. The Canon is better, if you were wondering. Now, put that side by side to the 70 to 300. Look how much shorter it is. It is also significantly lighter. The camera and the lens together weighs as much, if not less, than in my hands, than the 80 to 200. This also tends to come with a tripod collar. However, when I rented it, it didn't come with it. But if you want to purchase it used, you probably could get a tripod collar. That was one of the things I was wishing I had with me on the rental. For me, tripod collars come in clutch. Closest comparison is the Tokina 480 to 400 f4.5 to 5.6, which is the same brightness difference, and the Tokina is about the same size, right? In terms of height, this is girthier. The image quality on this is noticeably better. Is noticeably better than the Tokina. But then again, you can probably get the Tokina for about $250, while this is going to be double that price. Now, at the same time, if you were to extend this, it telescopes out just like the Tokina. Even when the Tokina telescopes out, it's about the same size. So, and you compare that to something like an 80-200, and this is also about the same size as the 70-200L from Canon. So this is in fact very similar in design, in the way I see it, to the RF lenses like the 70-200 f4 and f2.8, how they start short and then they extend out. But this is great because in terms of packing this thing into my bag, I can pack this lens in my bag with the camera mounted, just barely. I cannot ever do that with an 8200 f2.8. So that's just one of the things I like about this, especially if I wanted to travel with the lens. Last summer, I had brought this lens with me, 7210 f4 telescopic zoom lens. This is one of the first zooms on the EF mount. I brought this with me to this past summer to California. It was a road trip across the Pacific Coast Highway from San Francisco down to LA. And one of the things throughout the trip I was wishing I had was lens stabilization, image stabilization, IS. This has it. 7300, boom. When it packs, it is as short as the 70-210 f4. It is brighter. It is better image quality. It's one of those things where I wish I had this lens last year. Now, let's talk about control, specifically focus. One of the reasons I like to purchase Tokina lenses, I'll give you an example of what a Tokina lens allows me to do. This is an autofocusing Tokina lens. There's a hard stop here. Boom, there's a hard stop here. And if I need to do any sort of manual focusing where I can set my marks, I'll be able to do that effectively. I cannot do that with this lens. If I'm using this lens, the context in which I'm using it, I'm not looking to do those kind of repeat focuses. I want to be able to tap the screen on my camera, boom, it focuses. And so with relation to being able to focus, operating this lens, I can do it all through the camera by touching the screen, and it is fast. Now, in terms of how bright is this lens, like I mentioned earlier, if you have a full frame camera, having up to a 5.6 is not so bad. Yeah, image will get a little noisy if you're shooting video, for example, but then you can always apply some neat video noise reduction. The real value, the best feature in this lens is the fact that I have triple IS with the R6 Mark II combined. So let's start with this. So first, IS in the lens, right? And you have different mode. The entire time I had kept the IS on this mode. And then you have image stabilization on or off, and then you have the autofocus switch, right? So when it came to the image stabilization feature, one of the interesting things is that the R6 Mark II has in-body image stabilization. The sensor will shift and move to stabilize your image. So what this lens does is that if this switch is turned to on, then the image IBIS is also going to be enabled. But at the moment you switch this off, the IBIS in camera is also switched to off. Then there's the third level of stabilization, which is the digital IS. I'm not talking digital IS enhanced, but just the first level of digital image stabilization built within the camera. These three systems of image stabilization combined make for a very stable image, especially even when I'm zoomed in all the way to 300 millimeters. So that is something that was clutch for me. My only point of curiosity that comes up is how would this setup compare when in relation to something like a Panasonic S5 Mark II or S5 Mark II X, which supposedly has better IBIS than the M6 Mark II. Pair the IS to this as well as the digital IS on that together, maybe even the enhanced electronic digital stabilization on the S5 Mark II, considering they don't do the whole head stabilization AI thing that this camera tries to do. I'm wondering how that compares. So that's just a point of curiosity for another date. But generally speaking, the image stabilization, it's not dual IS to me. I'm looking at it as triple IS. And this is something that I was wondering whether or not I would need to use gyro stabilization. And I found that it is far more convenient and far more effective to do in-body lens digital IS as opposed to gyro stabilization, because you're going to lose a lot of the image in gyro stabilization, and it is dependent on you to be standing still and remove. And what gyro will do is it'll eliminate some of those micro jitters, whereas the triple IS on this, I can actually move with. I can slide. It'll definitely stabilize all of this movement. I've even been able to manage some orbital shots, kind of like slow orbital shots that I would be doing on a gimbal. Now, this setup is a little too heavy for the gimbal that I have. The gimbal that I have is a Ronin SC. The weight capacity on this thing is 4 pounds. So when I rig this thing up, especially for a situation like a wedding, this is a little too heavy to be carried on a gimbal. I would love to be able to carry it on a gimbal. I'm considering maybe checking out some gimbals with a larger weight capacity so that I could take advantage of that. But with what I've got currently, having the triple IS, the lens IS, the in-body image stabilization, and the digital IS combined together truly clutch the value that came with the renting of this lens. Now, one thing to keep in mind for shooting video, this lens is not parafocal, meaning if you zoom in all the way, you focus and you zoom out and you're manual focusing, you're going to lose your focus, right? However, the autofocus on the system is clutch. It is dependable, it is reliable. So as long as you got autofocus turned on, the varifocal is not really an issue when it comes to shooting video. Is there focus breathing? I don't know. You know, as I'm recording this video, it's one of those things where I just kind of come to realize focus breathing doesn't really bother me that much, unless you're rack focusing. But then again, if focus breathing is an issue, it's one of those things I can adjust in the edit as part of just kind of doing a focus breathing compensation via crop in the edit. But I think I've done that maybe once ever, but outside of that hasn't been an issue for me to even consider. So how's the focus breathing? I don't know. Now, one of the things I do like about this camera, not the camera, but the lens, is the minimum focus distance. Now, this has a macro feature. It's not like true macro in the sense of like you can see the eyes of a bug with the extreme detail. But one of my challenges with a lot of the vintage lenses, and these challenges are included in this guy here, which is the Tokina 28-70. I love this lens, but minimum focus is here. So literally at arm's length, I'll be in focus. Anything closer, gone. So that way, if I'm behind the camera and I want to focus in on something with relation to details, I'm not going to be able to do it with this unless I get a diopter. What about with something like this? This is not designed for minimum focusing. This is designed for shooting things in the distance. The Tokina has a good minimum focusing distance, but this thing's heavy, right? Like I got it to pair with this lens so I can get a tighter shot and stuff, and it has a nice aesthetic, wide open. It may not be the sharpest lens in the batch, but it's got a nice look to it. This is sharp, but I can't get too close with it. I had rented the 100-400 was because of its minimum focusing distance. I could get close, whereas this right here I feel like is the better option in comparison to say 100-400 millimeter, because of the fact that I don't need that 400 millimeter range indoors, for example. And at the same time, I definitely benefit from having a wider field of view to 70 millimeters as opposed to 100. And the image quality is as good as the 100-400. But at the same time, I can get really close. So it allows me to get like really detailed shots, portrait-like shots between 70-300 millimeters. And one of the things is that even if I'm chilling at home or at, family, I can just be sitting on the couch and I can be zooming in and out without having to move my butt, and I get the shots that I want and the look that I'm looking for. So these are one of the things that I like about having a minimum focal distance that's generally less than this. With relation to some video features that people look for in a manual lens, the aperture is all controlled in terms of the iris on the inside of the camera is all controlled by the camera, not inside the camera, inside the lens is controlled by the camera. And when it comes to adding any sort of filters, what is the filter thread size? It's 67 millimeters. So if you happen to have a standard set of filters or lens caps, in my case, most of my lens caps have been stepped up to 77 millimeters. I'm actually thinking about upgrading all of them to 82 millimeters. So even something like this, right? This is a 72 millimeter, right? And I got a 72, 77 step up ring. When it comes to like the subjective factors, among them is the bokeh, which is the aesthetic of the blur in the background. So this is a nice vintage lens and it's got this soap bubble bokeh, which looks really, really nice. And then there's also this, the Canon FD 85 millimeter f1.8, which also has a really nice soap bubble bokeh. So these two lenses were great, especially when I wanted to get those really pretty, aesthetically pleasing portrait style shots where any bright object in the background kind of like glistens and lights up because of the blur. These were the two lenses to do that for me. This, not so much. It's not going to look like fantastical and like spectacle, but it looks clean, it looks good. And so that's basically it. The images themselves, they'll be nice and contrasty, it'll be clear, sharp. So if you're looking for that, you got that in here. When it comes to like flare, again, when I'm comparing it to these two. Like these two give me flares. I get these because of the flare, right? I put them on because, hey, I'm looking for flare. Whereas on this guy, not so much, which is fine, right? Because if you're looking for a clean, sharp, clear image, almost clinical, this is the way to go. But if you're looking for some of that fancy stuff, then I had with me these two small primes, which were essentially doing the job that I wanted them to do. I like telephoto lenses, especially telephoto zoom lenses, because they're super useful in an event setting where you need to be able to move your feet and also zoom in. There's this mindset of like, oh, you know what? If you want to be able to zoom, move your feet, which is fine, which is a good principle and mindset to have. But you don't always have the opportunity to move your feet all the way. And so, and for the ability to be able to get a wide and tight shot at the same time or right after the other, I think the best alternative to having a zoom lens is essentially having two cameras where you stack them on top of each other like this. In this case, I have two ZV-E10s. I would essentially mount the two as such, the telephoto on top, the wide angle on the bottom, and I would shoot like this. I will have two strict focal lengths as if I am shooting both wide and tight at the same time. That is the best alternative, and I have done it in the past before and it's worked out great. And I've done that because I knew I was going to be in a super dim situation. I would be shooting with crop sensor cameras and my zoom lenses would not be bright enough. So therefore having some really bright f1.8 or f2 primes with my crop sensor Sony ZV-E10s was going to work out really, really well. So and if you're wondering about what are like some good ranges or zoom ranges to have, like 70-300 I believe is far better than a 70-200 unless you need the low light. Unless you absolutely need the f2.8, that's where the RF 70-200 f2.8 would probably come in really handy, because it's probably about this size. I'm not sure. I think it's smaller, right? And it's brighter. And if I need an extra reach from 200 to maybe 300, I can go into crop mode. And that, in fact, is probably going to be my next rental for whatever event that happens next. Either a 70-200 f2.8 or 120 to 300 f2.8 from Sigma. That's a lens that's been on my list to rent and try out just for the fun of it. So I hope you guys found value in this video. That's about it. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments below. I'll see you soon.